Confessionals, and if you're watching the YouTube channel only for the Confessionals, chances are you're missing out on over 200 episodes because we are a podcast first that uploads to YouTube when we get a chance. So if you're relying on YouTube only, you're missing out on over 200 episodes. If you want to get all those shows and all the future shows, on Tuesdays, we release a free show to the public. Go to any podcast playing app, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podbean, TuneIn, any podcast playing app, and you can get the Confessionals on there, and you'll never miss a show again. And if you want more of the show, every Thursday, we release a bonus show to members only to the website. All you got to do to get those is go to theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the join button, and you can become a member today and get 2 shows every week. And until you do any of those things, though, you're kind of stuck in purgatory right here on YouTube, and I feel bad for you. But today, we got a show for you. Let's get to it.
This was all circulating around the base that a giant had been killed, but no one was supposed to talk about it.
I saw 3 long, bony fingers reach up underneath the door, curl up to grab it, and then disappeared.
When he came over to me, dude, he slithered over to me.
And this giant comes out of the cave and they're all frozen. And he starts running and firing at this giant. Well, the giant moves. He's got a spear in one hand and he's running really fast and spears Dan and holds him up like this. Somebody yells, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. They basically decapitate him.
Got closer. When he got about 15 yards away from me, I raised that 12 gauge and I blowed his head off.
I feel something pulling at my leg, and I look over and there are 2 small gray entities pulling at me. And they're literally, I'm getting pulled off the bed.
I reached my hand into this bush and I touched air. Couldn't breathe and I couldn't move because I know I'm seeing a monster.
Yep. Welcome to the show, everybody. You're listening to The Confessionals. I am your host, Tony Merkel. Thank you for being here. If you've had an encounter or a story you'd like to share with me on the show, go ahead and shoot me an email. My email address is theconfessionals@theconfessionalspodcast.com. That's theconfessionals@theconfessionalspodcast.com. Or go to the website, theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the contact section, and you can reach me that way as well. Either way works for me. Just get a hold of me. And if you want more of the show every week, go ahead to the website, theconfessionalspodcast.com, and actually become a member to the website because we release an extra show every Thursday for members only. It is only $7 a month or $70 for an entire year. So go ahead to theconfessionalspodcast.com and become a member if you want more of the Confessionals on a weekly basis. Now, we have a great show planned for you guys today, but before we get into the details, I just want to remind you that me, my wife Lindsay, my son Ben, my brother Jack, and my sister Tanya are all making the trip to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference on May 2nd. I highly suggest that if you live within a 5 to 6 hour radius of that conference and you want to come hang out with me, go to theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the events section, and you can purchase tickets for the conference itself. And if you want to just hang out in the vendors area, meet all the cool people, see the Bigfoot pictures, Bigfoot casts, all that cool stuff, it is free to enter the vendor area of the conference. So if you just want to hang out at the vendors area and shop around, all you have to do is show up to Salt Fork State Park on May 2nd and hang out and enjoy the vendors area and meet me and all that fun stuff. So this week we have a great show planned for you though. We have Mandi coming on the show, and the interesting backstory with Mandi is she contacted me before I even started a podcast. I was just managing a small Facebook group talking about Bigfoot, and she had Bigfoot coming up to her mom's property, the house that she grew up in. And she was telling me her experiences experiences back then, and I was not the same person I am today. And I thought of Bigfoot very differently. I thought it was just an animal that we couldn't keep up with. And the more time that went on and the more stories I heard, I started realizing that there might be something a little different to this phenomena of Bigfoot than what meets the eye. But back then, all I thought was I was an animal. And she contacted me and she starts telling me this experience that she had where this Bigfoot was coming up to the property and the eyes were looking through the window, and she could tell because the eyes were illuminating and shining through the window. And she actually sent me video of this, and I saw it and I was intrigued, and I almost went out to her property to check it out. But in my gut, I was just like, Bigfoot's just an animal. Their eyes don't illuminate. This lady is either trying to prank me or she might be a little batty, but I really didn't believe that this was any Bigfoot activity. I just really thought that she was either making it up, trying to get attention, or just a little batty. And so I just kind of like let it fall by the side and really didn't think about it a whole lot. Fast forward to last year, late last year, I think in December or even early this year, she contacted me through email to the show and shared her story with me again. She didn't realize that she contacted me before, that I was the same guy that she talked to before, only I have a podcast now, and I recognized the actual story. So I went back and looked at old messages and I found it, and I was like, this is the same lady. And the only difference is me. I literally changed, and my mindset has changed, and my mind has expanded to the idea that there is more to this world than we can fathom, and to pretend that you have it all locked up and understood is actually really ignorant to do. And so, because I mentally have changed and expanded my mind, her story no longer seems that out of reach and that crazy to me. And what changed between then, her contacting me, and now is that she has actually seen this thing, and it's not just a Bigfoot with glowing eyes, but this thing is a cloaking Bigfoot. And she's going to come on and share her experiences and tell us what she saw right now. Okay, today we got a great show coming up. We have Mandi. Mandi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. So this was a long time coming.
Yes, it sure was.
Yeah, this interview, actually, I guess the process of it started before the podcast even started.
Yeah,
you contacted me. Yeah, you contacted me back in 2016 about the experiences you'll be sharing with us today. And back then, you did not understand what was going on. It was all very fresh and new. You're just like, you were questioning whether you were crazy. And as time went on, you did some research and you came across different podcasts like mine, where you started realizing that you're not the only one with these insane experiences. So I was running the group Pennsylvania Sasquatch Research, and you contacted me as the admin of the group, asking questions about your Bigfoot experiences around your house. And I remember one of the things, now I haven't even looked back at those messages. I have them, but I haven't looked back at them before this interview. And I remember at one point you had told me about their eyes. And I remember you sent me video of it. And it was clearly something on the other side of the doorway, and there was something illuminated, and it was like floating around. And I know you thought you were crazy. And at that time, I wasn't the guy I am today. And you were the first person to ever contact me to tell me that these things' eyes are lighting up. And I was like, what is wrong with this lady? I was like, I don't know. But I was... You
were like, who is pulling a prank on her with a flashlight?
Right. And the thing is, like, I didn't understand it. And I was intrigued, though. And I was like, I gotta, because you're like, you can come, because you're in Pennsylvania, and you're like, you can come out and check out the property. I'm like, I have to go check out this property because like, this is too intriguing to me. But I didn't understand it whatsoever. I couldn't even imagine a paranormal side to this whole thing, which I firmly believe and look at it this way now. But that whole experience that you had back then set your life on a different path where you were pursuing information and knowledge that you probably never thought you would be.
No, not at all.
So why don't you just go ahead and start from the beginning? I know you had moved into your mom's house. Tell us, I believe it was a childhood home. Just talk to us and let us know how this all unfolded and what went down.
Absolutely. Okay. So yes, this all began back in 2016. The home was my childhood home. So I had lived there about 18 years before I left and went to college, got on with my life. I mean, I went to college in Florida. So I was gone for 6 years. Around this time in 2016, I came back. My mother was ill. My parents are divorced. So I'm the eldest child and the closest child that was living to the area. So, and I had also gone through a bad breakup, and it just seemed like it was a good time for this. I mean, my mom had plenty of room, and but I was really struggling. I am a Christian, but I had really fallen off with God. I would say that I am the black sheep of the family, 100%. And I was just kind of lost in life. Like, what was my next step? I had a dead end job, even though I had a college degree, and I didn't, it was a tough time. So my daughter and I moved back with my mom, and I'm just to set the stage a little bit. This took place in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. So Franklin County, when you research experiences, it's not in the top 3. It's not in the top 10 or the top 15 for any type of strange anything. And like I said, I had grown up in this area and never had any kind of anything strange. We have the property is about on 4 acres surrounded by fields and woods. And the neighbors aren't too far away. The closest neighbor is a quarter of a mile. You can see homes from the house. You can see other homes. So being that I grew up there, I was very familiar with, the different lights and things that shone around there. And as children, we played in the woods. We all the time, every day. Back then, children played outside. They didn't sit in front of the TV and rot their brains. So that's just kind of the backstory. Not too rural of an area. It took about 20 minutes to get to a store, I guess. So this started out, I guess you would say maybe I was depressed, but I always found solace in the woods. And about 20 feet, I'd say, from the back of the house is the wood line. And I grew up hunting. My family, we're I guess what you would say rednecks, but not, in a negative way. I just grew up hunting, being in the woods all the time. Even before I was able to shoot a gun, we were hiking and camping and ATVing, and that's what we did. We didn't take luxurious vacations. We camped and we roughed it. And so I was very familiar with the woods. I was a hunter. So one of the first things I did that my mom was not too happy about is I got this big giant deer feeder from my dad, and I put it right at the wood line so I could see it from the back porch. And at night I would sit out there for hours, and this for somebody that loves the woods, they'll understand. I would sit out there for hours and I would watch the animals come in, and one deer feeder turned into 2 deer feeders on the other corner of the lot that I could still see. And I'd watch all kinds of animals come. No biggie, nothing. I mean, it really gave me peace and comfort. I'd just sit out there on my phone, and you can really tell the state that I was in, that I actually knew like how many raccoons there were, how many possums. So maybe that's not saying very much for my mental state, but I really did. I mean, so then I was like, well, let me put up a game cam, because we didn't get deer too often. They would pass through, but I knew that's something my dad would still be interested in, and so he gave me one of his deer cams, and I can't even tell you what type it was or anything. I knew how to run it. Of course, this would have been, it was probably 6. Well, let's see. It was probably 2 years old in 2016. So nothing newfangled fancy, just the Bear Essentials game cam. So I put that up and I start catching, pictures of deer and, things coming to eat. And it was mostly deer that the camera would catch, and nothing out of the ordinary. So about after 2 months of feeding the animals, one night I'm sitting out there, I can't remember the time, but I heard a very loud, very deep growl. And instantly, like, the animals scattered. And, at the time I thought nothing of it. It wasn't, my first thought was bear. It really sounded like a bear, but we don't, bears do, we do have bears in Franklin County, but they, the time of year it was this, I didn't think that was, I don't really know what I thought, to be honest. Like, it wasn't anything I was thinking about. The next night, the same thing happened. And as the nights went on, nights went on, the animals started to not come. So I have all this deer feed, and I'd still get, the varmint type, like the possums, the raccoons. The deer were gone. And I mentioned to my grandfather, who's been a woodsman his whole life, what do you think the possibility is of one of our black bears coming into the particular town that I lived in? And, he said, we had just, in a town adjacent, there was just a mother and cubs walking through the town. And he said, it does happen. It's possible. But that particular patch of woods is not a big patch of woods. It's not a forest. It doesn't attach to a lot of cover. There's a lot of fields behind that woods. So, and I kind of just brushed it off. That was the first thing, is what happened with the animals. So about going into month 3 of 2016, the animals had just died off left. They weren't coming anymore. It was I would still get, like I said, the possums. The weird stuff starts about that 3rd month. I am lying in bed, which my room, it was on the side of the house it was the side and the back of the house that faced the woods. So my room faced the woods, and then one of my other windows in the room faced the front of the house. So there's 3 windows in the bedroom. I woke up. There was no noise. I still to this day don't know what startled me, but I woke up and the room was bathed in like this type of blue light. And I know that sounds, strange. The blinds that we had were the cheap white blinds everybody gets, that they don't do very much for, they keep out the Bear Essentials is pretty much how those blinds are. They're cheap. They bend easy. You can see through the cracks and whatnot. And when there's a full moon, the room would be illuminated. So, my first thought is there's a full moon, but this was very clearly blue. So another thing about the house is it has a long lane that reaches down to a road that's not a busy road, but it's a thoroughfare that connects 2 states. If you stay on this road in 15 miles, you'll be in another state. And cars would come by, and because the lane to the house was open, no trees, you could see the headlights. So even though it was a decent distance, you could see the headlights of cars coming. So my first thought was, there's an accident. There must be an accident down on the road, and this is police lights. You're struggling for anything that you can get. That didn't make sense because where's the rest? But you're trying to make sense of it. So, it's really annoying. I'm laying there and I can't go back to sleep. And I start to notice these shadows going back and forth outside my windows. And again, these weren't fancy wood slat blinds. I can't remember what the name of these blinds are, but they're the cheap mini blinds. And if someone's outside in the light, or if it's illuminated, you can see inside the room the shadows. So these shadows are moving back and forth. And I know, because I slept in that room as a child through my young adulthood, that which trees are outside, and when the wind shakes, which limbs go back and forth, and what, could that potentially create a shadow that looks like a person moving. And I knew that that would not be the case. So after about an hour of this, I just was annoyed, and I jumped up out of bed and I ripped the blind open, and the blue light is illuminated outside also. And it was very strange. It was not a full moon, but it was blue outside. And you don't want to know my first thought. My first thought is, well, I guess I should have believed in aliens long ago, and they're about to beat me up. And here's my experience. I'm kind of I have a lot of humor, and I'm kind of sarcastic. So that was that thought ran through my head that, now I'm going to be punished, and I am finally going to be beamed up and probed. So, but no, that's not, what happened. There was no light source to be seen of why this blue light is there. And also, looking out the blinds, I'm thinking, well, maybe, I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe there's something new that's causing, maybe a limb fell and the wind is shaking it, but it wasn't windy. There was no limbs blowing back and forth. So I ended up falling asleep, no big deal. I just forget about it. The next night, the shadows come back. And a part about this experience is, I think, something because of the mental state I was in, so distraught of what am I going to do with the rest of my life. I wasn't sleeping well anyway. And so when these shadows came back outside my window, I started to think like something is wrong here. And this goes on for several nights, and I'd rip open the blinds and there's nothing out there. So, I start grasping for answers. I'm going to do as best as I can here with the timeline of events. Probably, a week or so, I'm starting to pay more attention to these shadows in the room. And, bear with me here because it sounds a bit nuts, but I started to notice that these shadows, they were different sizes and they were large. I would not say it was a humanoid shape. It was a humanoid shape. I could see arms, the shape of arms moving around like it was gesturing. I could see a shape of a head, and there was usually 2 or 3 varying sizes, and one was so tall, my window, the top of the window that faces the woods was at 10.5 feet, and this one particular shadow creature, whatever, would reach the top, and I could make out the whole body shape in my room. And at the top, where you would imagine eyes would be, there was 2 balls of light. And still at this time, it's not sinking in with me because it doesn't till we get further into the story. I'm just seeing these 2 balls of light where eyes would be on a creature or a person, and they're reflecting into. It's hard for me to explain this. They were emanating light, and the light would change. In the beginning, the light was blue. And so let's just say, for the sake of explaining, the eyes were blue. So the next day, after I'd figured this out, that, hey, these 2 lights on each of these figures seems to be eyes, I started searching, for reports of blue eyes, anything. I could not find anything. This was back in 2016. I couldn't find anything. I had read some stories about Bigfoot, eye shine, but that at that time was a wild. That was a kooky idea. It wasn't widely accepted. Yeah. And this was not, this couldn't be a Bigfoot because I wasn't having other strange things happen. But that was the first search that I did on the eyes. Time goes on, and the animals do start to come back to the feeders. And so now I had a new project. I would be researching, the things that were going on. And I didn't I would be sitting outside on my little porch while I was watching the animals, and I would hear all kinds of things in the woods, twigs snapping, and it sounded like things being thrown, but no strange, no, nothing other than those first couple growls. That's all I heard. I never heard any like tree knocking or any strange thing like that. My daughter, I have shared custody of her, and she would be at her dad's thumb. We like to do slumber parties in the living room. We would put the couch, the fold-out couch out, and we'd watch movies. And so one night we were watching a movie, and my little daughter at the time, let's see, she would have been about 8, I believe, 8 years old. She looked at me, and we'd have all the lights out except the TV, and in the living room there are wood slat blinds. She looked at me and she said, "Mommy, what is that light out there that's moving?" And I was like, "Oh no, well, there's no way that she could have seen this. This is a different type of blinds." And up until that time, I had not noticed the strange light outside any other room but my bedroom, which is another reason I was thinking maybe the room was possessed. But that particular evening, I saw what she was looking at, and I crept up to the blinds, and I got down and I looked through the hole just like you would imagine somebody that was crazy would do. And I'm thinking, from the living room there is miles of farm field, and beyond that there are lights from the town. And often from our living room you can see there are cell phone towers, there are neighbors way out, miles away, that you can see the lights from our living room. And that's originally what I had thought it was. That is not what it was. And I feel comfortable now sharing this because I've heard it before. I'm looking through this blind, and if anyone wanted to know why I didn't yank the blind up, the fear that these experiences had been causing me was overwhelming. I can't even tell you. I felt like a child that was afraid of a monster under the bed. I mean, the balls that it took to try and get myself to open these blinds, to open the doors, to face my fear. It was the most overwhelming fear I've ever felt in my life, of something that, wasn't even there. At the time there was nothing there. It was like the proverbial being able to face your demons. It was terrifying. So, that is the reason I didn't yank the blinds up. And I was scared, as a grown adult, and this is my child looking up to me. I was terrified because I had already been seeing these lights in my room and these shadows for weeks. And I'm not going to lie, it gave me a little bit of comfort that, because the first thing I'm thinking is, if somebody else can see these, that means I'm not nuts.
Right.
And that's horrible. But it is. When you think about proving something, you need evidence. And you can't get evidence of shadows walking outside your room. It's not possible. You need evidence. And if you're going to go with it, you have to prove that this is really happening. So I crawled down off the sofa bed, and I got up next to the window and looked out, and we had our outside light off. And I'm looking around for whatever I'd seen, and I don't see it at my eye level. And I look up, and I just, like what I saw, I sank back onto the floor. And my daughter, we'll just call her G, she said, Mommy, what is it? What do you see? And I remember saying to her, honey, I just saw something that is not possible. And she said, what does that mean? Being young, she had no idea. What is it? Now I feel comfortable saying it. It didn't make sense at the time, but I didn't see anything at eye level because this thing was a ball. We have a small tree in the front yard, just one tree, because years ago, a storm had knocked down the giant oak tree we had in the front yard. So Mom had planted a new one. And by that time it was probably about 14 feet tall, very skinny though, not the limbs weren't out on it yet. too much. I know that sounds not very descriptive, but I'm not an arborist. I don't know about trees. So I look up, and when I looked up, there was a ball of light, and it, I guess, like people would say an orb, but not an orb. I'm going to do the best I can with the description. It wasn't an orb because it had a yellowish orange kind of, I could imagine that I could have stuck my hand out and held this in my hand. It wasn't big, bigger than a softball, and it was floating in a straight line across the yard. So, I mean, I probably watched it go 2 feet from this tree. So let's say the tree's 14 feet tall. This ball of light was about 2 feet shorter than that. And it was going in a straight line, and I was watching it. And you can imagine, like, the fear in my heart that something is suspended in air. And I liken it to, like, I mean, I had said when I told this to people that it was like a magic ball, I guess, in Disney movies. That's not a good description, but it was emanating a type of light, and it was just hanging there, going from left to right. And like, I should have stayed looking at it to see what it did, but I like I said, I sank back on my haunches, and I just looked at her, and she's like, "Mommy, what did you see?" And I was like, "I just saw something that is impossible. That's not possible." And obviously, that was not, I don't want to say I was a closed-minded person, but in the same token, I'm not a super scientific person that everything needs to have a scientific explanation. But to me, that was not in my realm of possibility. So, I tried to block that out. I didn't look back out and see if it was still there because I was just stunned. We laid back, and she continues watching her movie, and when the movie's over, we turn the TV off, and she's still not asleep. And we're laying there, and she said, "Mommy, look, the light's back." And we look outside, and around that part of the house where the living room is, there is a brick sidewalk. And the only way I can describe this is we could see, again, these two balls of light that I will call eyes moving with a figure. You could see the figure through the wood slat blinds. It was giving off some sort of light. And when it got over to the front door, this is kind of where it comes in, the picture comes into, or the video that I had sent you. It would like look in, the light would get down right next to the front door, and you could see the light coming through the slats in the front door. And it wasn't, she was seeing this, and she was like, "Mommy, I can't go to sleep in here. It's scaring me," because this continued. And the only thing that I can say at this time, at this point in the story, is that it would be like if a ghost had on some sort of light up goggles and was walking back and forth down the sidewalk, which goes in front of all the windows in the living room, all the windows in the dining room, and to the front door. And it just did that for hours. It literally was as tall as a person, and you could see where the eyes were, and it would just keep doing that. And so that's what got my daughter scared, because, and I'm not going to lie, this seems, a little harsh. She's a child, yes, but I had never mentioned any of these things to her before. So it did make me feel good, because, I'd been starting to pray again. And, I knew from my upbringing that if this was something that some sort of affliction I was having, that getting back into a relationship with God would cure this, and that perhaps I was having a break with reality. And so I really started working on myself, but the things continued. And I remember praying to God, like, "Please, Lord, take this affliction away. Whatever I've done, if there's evil entering my life, please just make it go away." And it didn't. And I didn't doubt God any less, but I think it reaffirmed to me that this wasn't a hallucination that I was having. So again, I'm continuing to search for answers. These things go on for months. My daughter would not sleep without me. She would not sleep in the living room. And it only escalated. I decided that I needed to get evidence. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a part. Well, this kind of goes along with it. Just like I had previously said, if something like this is happening to you, the only way people are going to believe you is if you have evidence, and not evidence where you have to draw the lines together and, change the lighting and use Photoshop to point out what you're looking at. I needed something solid to explain to people what was actually happening. So I started walking around the property looking for things that might fit into what I was experiencing. And it was so tough because I felt like what I was experiencing mostly wasn't tangible. It wasn't what I would consider a physical being at the time. And it wasn't checking any boxes of anything that I could find. So I did end up, after one of these nights of being up, looking out, I found what I would consider footprints, but they were not good footprints. To me, I could definitely identify that they were footprints, but they were in mulch and they were large, not what a human footprint would be. And
I remember you sending me those. You sent me pictures of those. I might have.
And you know what, Tony, looking back on that's humiliating too, because they
don't worry about it.
I had gotten some wire out of a shed and tried to make what I was seeing, and I looked at it again and I was like, what are you doing, Mandi? No, people are going to look at this and think you are just sign you up for the loony convention. Well, and look, so I was
I'll tell you what. I mean, it's the impossible makes you do impossible things that you never thought you would do. You wind up doing.
It does. But you know what? At some point, I kept thinking, well, are you grasping? Are you grasping just to try and put, a diagnosis on your psychiatric condition? That's kind of what it got to be. So, so to go along, I kept trying to get videos, but when you are in a dark room and the lights are outside, and to explain this eye shine, and it wasn't always the same. It started out blue, and that's what I was looking for, blue eye shine. And there's been back and forth about this, but what I personally was seeing was an inside light source. And I think that's been the back and forth question. And when I was trying to get help with this, no one took me seriously because it was dark. There was no lights on, and you could clearly see blue, which means that this blue was coming from inside the entity, whatever it happened to be. It wasn't reflecting off of anything, and again, this is just a piece of the puzzle that ended up making sense later. So we started seeing lights in the woods after that, and not just the orb type of lights, but the eyes in what you would consider a normal eye shine video. So when I would be sitting outside, or we would have family over for a campfire, and they all thought I was nuts, but they would see these lights, and two, very large circle, what would be eyes. I mean, of course, they were set a little bit further apart than what would be a human and higher up. But again, nothing physical, nothing tangible. I did take many videos of these. I remember one night coming home from shopping with my daughter, and we didn't even get out of the car. We undid our seatbelts, and I had parked the car so that it was facing a grove of pine trees at the end of the yard. And my daughter looks out the windshield and says, "Mommy, look, they're down there." And this was the first time that I had seen them in this particular grove of trees. So I jumped out and I get my camera and I start recording, and I'm thinking in my head, of all the ways to debunk this. and, what all light sources are behind this grove of trees that could be shining through. But again, I've lived there my whole life. I know what porch lights are where. And it was like there was a very high set of eyes, and then one that would be about halfway further down. And I recorded, and I wish I could find these. I recorded this for like an hour, 2 hours, because just having everything is something. So, but again, the eyes, I still wasn't seeing anything physical. So let's just fast forward. Okay. So the game cams. I knew that having, when I originally put up the first game cam, it was just to catch the deer. After this started happening, I put up another one and didn't realize, that depending on what this was, game cam might be pointless. But I thought, we'll give it a shot. My one game cam ended up being ripped off the tree that it was, well, I say ripped, I'm assuming. It was taken off the tree, and the front of it was cracked completely. Like I would imagine if there was a stone, rock dropped on it. But I still was able to retrieve the card inside. And the 4 pictures that were, I guess, the last pictures on it are nothing but hair. I've looked at them over and over, and it was at dark. It was 4:00 in the morning, and it's just hair. You can't really see anything, and obviously nothing that I would be good for anything. The second game cam never picked up anything either, and it ended up disappearing. One day I went out to get the SD card out, and it was gone. It was completely gone. Probably about a week after that, the fields that I mentioned that you can see from the living room, there is a farmhouse and a farm down there that the people don't live in year round, but they rent out the farm property, the fields, to people. And the people that rent it out, they will hunt down there. And these folks came up. I happened to be home. My mom wasn't. And they started talking about, the property and if we had seen anyone around. And I said, no, it's a very, very long farm. Well, it's about a mile farm lane, and it's secluded. I've never seen anyone, no high school kids, anyone doing anything mischievous back that way, because really no one knows it's back there. But they started asking around and said that they'd had some damage to the property. And, at the time I really wasn't thinking anything of it. And we were talking about hunting and whatnot. And they said that they weren't getting good pictures of anything, any deer at all on their game cam. And I kind of said, well, yeah, the wildlife seems to be disappearing. And then it was a father and son, and the father looks at me. It kind of made me uncomfortable at the time because I thought he was accusing me, but he said, well, we had one of our very expensive game cameras completely destroyed. And I was inquired after it. What do you mean? And apparently they had it placed on a tree that was kind of near the creek, and faced a large open field. And they said that it was off the tree, and it was laying on the ground right next to the creek, where if the waters would have risen a little bit, it would have washed it right down. And it was completely smashed into smithereens. And I mean, I don't know these folks well, but I mean, I did kind of feel like he was being I don't know, maybe he thought I was lying about not knowing if there was anyone down there, but that was just a little piece of information that I stored in my head. I told him I'd keep an eye out and didn't think anything of it at the time. So again, with the evidence, I had a friend. I need, my 8-year-old daughter doesn't really count. I needed someone else that was an adult and of sound mind to come to the home and experience a night and see what it was like. And of course, I gave them a little synopsis. They thought I was nuts, but they said, sure, I'd be happy to come. So my girlfriend, she said she'd come and spend the night. So it was just me and her. And we were watching some movies. I didn't want to influence her too much with what, I also didn't want to lose my friendship by telling her exactly how bad it had been. So she came over and I decided to turn the lights out in the living room, and immediately, actually, I believe that was the night that I filmed that video for you. Immediately, as soon as we turned the lights out, it started. And I was quick to point out to her, now, see, do you see the lights are moving? This is not a stationary light. And also, when the wind blows, if there's limbs in your field of vision, outside, that can make it look like the light is moving. The wind's blowing the limb back and forth over a light source. It could make it seem like the light is moving. And I explained that to her, and that petrified her. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I'm interrupting you because you saying what you just said about the tree limbs is something that I tried explaining to people for years now. And there are certain people that just don't understand the fact that when the wind blows, there are tree limbs that literally move between your line of sight and the light source, making it look like there's something blinking at you. I can't tell you how many times I've tried explaining this to people, and there are people that are just adamant. No, I'm just like, you might be right, but I'm telling you, this is a very likely a possibility.
Right.
Go ahead.
It goes with good debunking. I mean, if you're going to present something as evidence, you have to look at all possibilities. I mean, and this had gotten so severe. I was outside making notes of where every natural light source, every person's porch light, every cellular tower, anything that you can see through my woods, because you can't present it as valid if there's a way that and with the woods, that's something that is tricky, because if it's not a large body of wooded area, and there are lights from, way beyond, all the wind has to do is go a little bit and you'll think that something jumped, or, it's, an owl. I mean, you have to look at every possibility. And so that's what I wanted to make sure that she was understanding, is that this is not, yes, we can see lights from outside, but this is something that is moving. And she was panicked at that moment. She was like, I don't want to stay here. I'm ready to go. I said, it's only 9:00, but you still have the whole night. Like, I needed her to be able to see everything. But just that, I think she really had thought that I was crazy. But seeing this figure move down the sidewalk to other windows, it was scary for her. So the night goes on. She just insisted on sitting right at the couch. But for some reason, and I've tried to remember why this was, I can't remember. She needed to go down in the laundry room, and the laundry room faces the woods. And there's one door on it that has a large window. I can't think of the name of the door, but it's just a door that has a window from floor to ceiling in it. And there was no curtain on it. And it always creeped me out the most, because literally anything could be looking at you through that window in the dark, straight from the woods, and you would never even know. And I always told my mother, you need to put a curtain on this door, which she has now. But she went down the laundry room. For some reason, I think she must have had something in the dryer, maybe. And I was in the other side of the house, and it wasn't 2 minutes till she went down there, and we heard this blood curdling. I can't describe it other than it was an animal's noise, like something being slaughtered. That's what and it was so loud, Tony. It sounded like it was on top of the roof, and she screamed as loud as she could, and she came running, and she said, did you hear that? Did you hear that? I said, yes, I heard it. What was it? And she said, Mandi, it was right outside the door. It was right outside the laundry room door. Obviously, we're looking. There's something outside the laundry room. And that is the first kind of strange, other than the growling, which I wouldn't put outside the realm of typical wildlife, that was like something, this is creepy. And I also felt like, why tonight? Why has this never happened with me, just me, but it's happened with my friend here visiting. And I thought, well, maybe they don't like her. But so that, again, I shouldn't laugh at my friend's misfortune, but I was like, yes, I'm not crazy. I'm not about to be possessed. I'm not having some sort of affliction. This is really happening. So let's see. So let's get to the point about getting to the late 2016. This had been going on for a while, and I really had just accepted that this was just going to keep happening. And I was in a bad state because I couldn't understand it. I had reached out to people, but again, at the time, the things were so strange. It didn't make sense to anyone, and it didn't make sense to me. And I was questioning myself, why? Do you know how many nights, and I would honestly, to be honest, I would get up next to my window in my room and just talk to whatever this was out there and say, I don't understand. Am I doing something wrong? Are you here from another planet? Why? These figures moved with conscience. They moved like a living being. This was not a ghost. And I also don't want to say that I don't believe in, or I didn't believe in ghosts. I'm a Christian. I believe that, I thought I believed that when you die, there's no in between. You're not hanging out because you didn't get another one of your favorite cheeseburgers. You're waiting for for Jesus to come back and raise everyone from the dead. There's no in between. And that's just my personal belief. As far as aliens, I don't know. At the time, I thought it was crazy, but this was starting to open my eyes that obviously this is happening to me for a reason, and it's not a demonic affliction, and this house isn't haunted, nothing. And I struggled a lot because it wasn't a typical area that anything had happened before, or I had never experienced anything that I thought of, and it was horrible. I'll just say it like that. I was really struggling. So it came to a head one night. I was like, I've got to figure this out. I've got to figure out what is doing this. I mustered up all the courage that I could. And when the shadows started to do what they would do, walking back and forth in front of the windows, sometimes one, sometimes two, three, it was really hard to tell, but they were of different heights. And I would see outside my window the arms moving all around and the heads moving, and it would seem like they were gesturing or speaking, but you could not hear a sound. You could not hear a single thing outside. I even tried cracking my window a teeny tiny little bit so I could hear something when I went to sleep, and I wouldn't hear anything. So this particular night, I'm like, I'm going to catch them. I don't know what I thought I was going to do, but it took all the courage in my body to be like, this has to end right now. So when they started moving around again, and I crept up to my window, the closest one to me, and I said, on the count of three, I'm just going to yank this up. And I had attempted this before, but I wouldn't yank up the blind the whole way because I was so petrified of what I was going to see. I do believe that there was one or two times I did, and there would be nothing there. There would be nothing there. And also I should say that car reflection or the car headlights that I spoke about earlier, when the shadows would be outside the windows moving, initially the very first time I thought, well, great, the next time a car comes, it will illuminate my window and I'll be able to see who is standing outside my window. Nothing. But when it would shine on my window, there would be nothing there. And, it wasn't making sense until this moment. So I get to the window, I put my hand on the cord, and I just say, on the count of three, I waited until one was in front of my window. And I went 1, 2, 3, and I just yanked the cord up as fast as I could. And I saw it for the first time. And please bear with me while I explain. The fear that I felt was like crippling at that moment. I had no idea what I was about to see. I really assumed, a part of me thought I wasn't going to see anything. But when I yanked up that blind, I saw the figure, but the figure was see-through. It was about halfway up my window, above my windowsill. The measurement on my windowsill is a little over, is about 5 feet. So this figure came up about 6 feet tall from the ground. And I understand more now, having a better understanding and things gone on. But at the time, imagine what it was. A blob. It was a clear blob with a very definite outline. It seemed jagged, and I've told Tony that to me it looked like hair there, and the eyes. So this is the moment that this crazy story makes sense, that I was right. That blue was the eyes. And how can I explain this? So it was like I could see this creature's eyeballs, and they were emanating this bright blue light. They were giving off this bright blue light, and I could see the darks of the eyes, no white, but I could not, I could see the arm. Its arm was raised up against my window, like leaning on the house, because I couldn't actually see the hand. So let me put it like this. The right hand was leaning up against the house. I assume the left arm was down at its waist. It didn't take up the whole window, but it was not a humanoid shape. So what I'm saying is, like, it wouldn't be like you took a person that was invisible and put them outside. It was a large creature that I assumed to have hair. And I could see the eyes, but I could not make out the rest of the shape other than, its mass. And you could see there's a giant oak tree right behind my window, and you could see the oak tree through the object. And I've been trying to think of other ways. I mean, everyone says this is like, they call it the predator, the predator maybe. But to me, I was thinking, like, when you see movies and they're in a desert and there's an oasis, the distortion around the oasis, this is what that looked like. So it was like kind of not jiggling like Jello. Does this make sense?
No, it absolutely does make sense. I'm following you. Keep going. I think you're doing fine.
Okay. Yeah. So, and it was looking at me, and even though I felt like tremendous fear, it was like a moment. I felt this like calm, that whatever this is, I'm finally seeing it, and it's seeing me. This isn't, I can't say what it was. I mean, I have ideas at this time what it is, but at that time, I still didn't know. But I just knew one thing for certain, is that this was not a demon. I wasn't about to be abducted and probed or anything like that. It had conscious, like it saw me. And this moment, I can't tell you how long it went on, probably only like 5 or 6 seconds. And I could see that a car was coming down the road. And I was thinking that the next thought was, well, that's great, because as soon as the car gets to a certain point, it will illuminate up to the house, and I will be able to see more of this figure, because I don't think it had set in with me that I could see through it. I just thought that if the light showed more on it, that I could actually see it. Looking back now, I think that this, it was kind of going in, and this sounds so nuts. I feel like it wasn't in. If I were to imagine that these creatures can go in and out of invisibility, I guess they call it the cloak. If they could go in and out of this cloaking thing, I pictured that this thing was semi in it, because even though I couldn't see anything But the eyes were like magnetic. I mean, it's like it was searching through my soul, and that sounds crazy also. But as soon as the car's light got to the point where it was showing, it was gone. There was just nothing. And I'm just looking out the window, and there's nothing there. There's no ripple. There's no distortion in the window. There was a little bit of like, the window seemed to be a little bit wet on the outside, like moisture or something like that. But it was gone. And I was just in shock. I didn't know what to do. Like, I thought, well, do I close the blind? Like, is it going to come back? Is that it? Why did it let me see it now? You know, it all just didn't make any sense to me. But I felt this relief that I finally knew what it was. And so after that, I did some searching, and I couldn't find anything that was similar to that at the time that had happened that was the same. But it gave me so much solace knowing, like, that I finally knew what these things were, and it started to make sense in my head.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
I hate the fact I just interrupted you. Please remember where you were going. But you keep saying that you finally knew what it was. At that point in time, what were you thinking it was?
No, I didn't mean that I knew what it was. I meant that I knew that it was a thing, like that it wasn't a shadow person.
I got you. Okay.
You see what I mean? Like, no, so I didn't really know what it was. Not like it spoke to me and told me, but I meant that it was I don't know, like that it wasn't, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. Like, it wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was an actual thing.
Sure.
And so I think that gave me some solace, but there still was so many unanswered questions, like things didn't make sense. And it was shocking. Like, I think I was even more messed up after that happened, because it was so outside my realm of like what is feasible. And I think I probably had formed some ideas in my head of what I would see if that moment ever came. And I mean, it didn't. Those opinions weren't what I was thinking. I mean, so the time that happened, that was when I actually got to realize what it was, and everything started to fall into place. You know, every time I would be sitting out there outside and feeling like I was being watched, and like knew that I was being watched, but I didn't see anything, you know, and you can't grasp at straws for something that isn't there. If there's not something there, you know, I would see giant limbs shake, but there was no wind and nothing moving and nothing tangible. And, you know, those, I couldn't get footprints, and, but the shadows definitely were real. So basically, throughout the rest of 2016, these things just continued to happen. And I guess, you know, it got to be too much. I couldn't, it was time for me to move on. And I decided that I just couldn't live there anymore and deal with this. So I ended up moving. I ended up moving into my own home, my daughter and I. And for a long time, I didn't go back to visit my mom. I just couldn't face it. But it did come to a point that I couldn't put it off any longer. I'd say it was about maybe 6 months, 8 months into 2017. And to be honest, I had to go back because I needed to know if it had just been the time that I was struggling and if I imagined all of it. So the first time I went back, I was very wary. I think I actually stayed with her about 2 weeks this first time that I went back. And the very first night that I was there, they were outside my window. And I don't know how I felt. Like I felt like, again, you feel comfort that you're not losing your mind, but it makes me wonder, what did I do or what happened to bring these creatures to this place, or whatever, and again, when we talk about Bigfoot, there wasn't a lot of the things that go along with Bigfoot. And, since I think at that time I had been thinking that they were Bigfoot, but I don't know if I thought that they must have been able to, because that's what I'll just say that now. I'm rambling, but when I looked at the creature in outside, I felt that was a Bigfoot. But in my mind, it's not what I had been picturing, because you picture a Bigfoot, but that's not how it comes out.
Yeah.
It's not how it appeared to me, if that makes sense. And I think that's kind of what I had been thinking that they were. During the time that I stayed with my mom, over that 2 weeks, the next sound that I got was owls. We started having these strange owl calls, and I actually have some recordings of those as well, which, that's a disputed thing, whether or not these things mimic. But we had not had, of course we have owls, but we'd never had them that close before. And I would sit outside and be talking on the phone or whatever, and these if it was an owl, they would call back and forth from right at the edge of the forest. There would be one on one side of the woods and one on the other, going back and forth. And I actually was able to record that, and it was really strange. I mean, hearing something that I hadn't heard before, but again, no stick structures, nothing like that. I just kept waiting for a day when something would actually appear to me as a Bigfoot, what I had thought, and that never happened. So as far as my puzzle goes, these things have continued to visit my mom's. I go and visit every few months, and they are still there. I have not seen one again like that before, like I did for the one that I just explained outside my window. They don't appear like that to me, and I don't know. I guess I just wanted to get the story out because there's so many missing pieces. I feel like with the situation, I mean, and it's left me feeling kind of hollow, because while I have comfort knowing that I'm within my full mental faculties, and I've never had anything like this happen at any other place I live. I don't see things on the daily. I don't live a life of paranormal experiences. So I guess that's my question. And also, for other people being able to see it. I took my then boyfriend to visit my mother in 2018, and I told him a little bit of what had happened. But, when you're seeing someone, you don't want to scare them too much, and it sounds crazy. And he actually had his own experiences during that time. We stayed for 3 days. I believe it was over a holiday. And we were sitting outside on the porch, evening, not late evening, maybe like 10 o'clock or so. And I had gone inside to get something, I think coffee or something. And he came running inside and said, I just heard this terrible, he said, like growling noise. He said, and it shook the porch. And he said, do you have bears? I mean, he's kind of more of a city person. And I just kind of laughed because I haven't heard a noise that had, he said, it had such deep bass, it shook your porch, and I hadn't heard anything like that. And he stayed up very late that night. I went to bed, and in the morning he said the woods is haunted. Your mom's woods is haunted. He said there was all these lights going through, he said, and I felt like there was a ghost in the woods. That's another thing, that beside the balls of light and the eyes, at times it would look like there was something illuminated, like a figure illuminated in the woods, giving off its own light source. And I have considered the fact that perhaps since these eyes that I've seen are so bright, that they perhaps can illuminate its entire body as it walks through the woods. But I can't say for certain because I haven't, I haven't seen that up close and been able to say for certain the eyes are connected to this creature's body. So I'm trying to think if I missed anything else. I know it kept me from saying anything for many years, but I think more recently I've heard more reports like this. But the biggest thing with me is that this was not a humanoid. It was not a figure in the shape of a human. This is very definitely what I would call the shape of a Bigfoot if I were to see one, and its flesh and plus the outline of it was like hair. I can't explain it. Many stories I've read, the outline was very smooth. That was not how this was. And again, there was no secret connection when I looked into its eyes. There was no hidden undertones or meaning or telekinesis or telepathic anything. It wasn't telling me anything. And I didn't have any feelings of like, it's not going to hurt me, or I just want to know why. I want to know how this even happens. And, how did it, my thought initially was, when you read reports, well, Bigfoots are, attracted to deer feeders, and perhaps I had attracted this animal, or Bigfoots, and perhaps that's why they followed a deer back. And but that's, again, it's not in the flesh. So I just don't understand. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, how can it come out of nowhere? And
and even the deer feeder thing, like I don't ever get that, because the idea of a superior apex predator like a Bigfoot that could take any kind of food it wanted anywhere, anytime, would be attracted to deer feeders under the principle of it being free food.
Yes.
Like, everything's free food for a Bigfoot. It's a freaking Bigfoot. You know what I mean?
I agree. And I think I had mentioned to you that my mother is a cat person, and she has several indoor, outdoor cats. And over the period of 2 years, so even after I had moved out, 2 of the cats had disappeared. But I don't group that into a category of, well, that's definitely, the cats disappeared, so we got to chalk it up to this. I mean, cats that are indoor, outdoor cats, it's the wildlife. I mean, and that's why, I don't try to assume that some of these things are what they're not. I can say how I feel and what I experienced, and it just doesn't fit into all the categories, and I can't check the boxes. It's just unexplained.
Well, here comes the part of the show where I tell you what you saw. No, I'm just kidding.
I wish it was that easy. I truly do.
Let me pretend to be an expert and tell you all about Bigfoot.
Right. And what they do and don't do. And, in doing research, you try and make sense of it. Mostly, once you get past the part that you're not the only one, you try and make sense of where your category fits. And I think I just don't know what category it fits. I don't feel like this was secret military technology that was in my woods. I don't feel like it was an undercover operation. I do feel like this being, there's a reason that all these things went on, and I didn't see anything. And like, it makes sense looking back on it now, how you could think you're crazy by seeing shadow people walk around. But again, I go back to the eyes. This was way before that was accepted. And I think I told you, I did speak with a couple people that I definitely did not get an email back. And I definitely got hung up on when I started talking about the eyes. But I mean, it was once I started to have an infatuation with catching me, because the house is a ranch style, and it has a wing that comes out where you can see the outside of my bedroom window. So I thought, well, I am going to catch this thing outside the windows and outside my bedroom windows. I'm going to flick the light on that goes to that outside, and I'm going to catch it. And I would never catch anything. But do you know how many times, like in the pine trees right behind that, I would see the bright blue eyes? And my mother even saw it. And she was like, well, I can't even remember what she said. It was something so crazy. I was like, Mother, look at those. Those are two blue eyes. And it was so quick. I remember thinking, like, how can this thing disappear so quickly when I'm seeing it and I rush around to put the lights on and it's moved back like 100 feet? I know it sounds insane, but when you go through and deselect all of the things that you can count as debuff, it's just what I'm trying to say. It's awkward. It's flustering.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you. You said that this happened in Franklin County, right?
Yes.
Franklin County I think 30 runs right through Franklin, right?
Correct. Yes. 30. And, I know you drive trucks. So like if 30 goes Gettysburg to Chambersburg, and if you would continue going down 30, you would eventually get through. And that's another thing is when I first started reaching out to people, they want to know where you live, and then they'll Google map it and see if there's enough forest around to sustain something. I don't know what it is they're looking for.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
No, all right. So what they're looking for is that, they're looking to see the environment because they want to see, are you really close to towns? Is it really truly possible that you're seeing a Bigfoot? All this other stuff. Right. I want to ask you, and I have a reason for asking these things. How far is this location from Michaud State Forest?
It is about 12 miles, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as the location goes, let me think here. I'm trying to think of what's in that area. Let's go with Gettysburg, heading west on 30 towards Michaud State Forest. Are we talking about this location being between Michaud State Forest and Gettysburg?
No. Michaud State Forest have you ever heard of Callan's Gap State Park?
Yeah.
That location is about 8 miles from Callan's Gap State Park.
So the location that this stuff happened?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you another question.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to ask questions around what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah.
You know where Fairfield is?
Yes.
How far time-wise is a drive from Fairfield to the location that this stuff was happening?
It kind of would be a hike, because we're talking about Fairfield, PA, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking Fairfield should be probably south of, Franklin. Right?
Okay, so from there to Fairfield would be 33 miles.
All right, cool. So I'm thinking there's something interesting, and I'm not saying it's true. It's anything other than just a theory and suspicion that I have of a certain location in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And Franklin County, it's a pretty big area. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure Franklin County is on the west side of Michaud State Forest. And I was thinking it was on the east side.
Yeah, this particular place is very close to Maryland. It's only about 9 miles from the Maryland state line.
Okay.
All right.
So on the other side of the Show State Forest in Fairfield, there is a underground facility, military facility called Ravens Rock. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not. No, I'm familiar with underground facilities, but not that particular one.
It's called Raven Rock Mountain Complex, and it's a U.S. military installation. And I have a lot of suspicions about this facility and what it does and what it is. Mm-hmm. You can look it up on Google Maps, and you see the tunnels that go into the earth, and that's all you see. Mm-hmm.
What is it called again?
Raven Rock Mountain Complex. And I think, because I've heard that there are more than one underground military base in Pennsylvania. I think Raven Rock is definitely one of them. And I always question what they're doing in there. And, you know, you hear stories of people talking about what goes on in these underground military bases. And you mentioned about how you weren't sure, or you didn't think that it was anything to do with the military or government.
Well, I'm not an expert.
Well, me neither. I'm just saying, based off of my suspicions surrounding Raven Rock, if you want, go ahead on Google Maps, look up Raven Rock Mountain Complex, and you tell me how far it is from that location where you were seeing things.
Let me look it up. Yeah, also, while I'm doing that real quickly, I mean, I don't post on like blogs or anything like that, but in looking for others that might have a similar experience near me, I did find a man that literally not even 4 to 6 miles from where I am, he's had 2 experiences of what, see, I won't come out and say 100% I know it's a Bigfoot, because I can't say that, but he's positive that he saw one of these predator-like creatures, and he also had an experience where he said that he heard all this noise and it approaching him and his friend while they were fishing on the creek that runs by my house, and that it splashed out in front of them. It was dark, and they were preparing to see this giant thing, and there's nothing there. He said that it made such a racket, was ripping down all these trees, and there's no way it could have been anything else, and they were petrified out of their minds. And then it steps into the clearing. They hear the footsteps, and it steps into where they should be able to see it, and it's not there. And you know, he's I think just starting out his, you know, investigating a little bit. But that's the closest thing that I've heard that also isn't you know, a face-to-face encounter. And he was very sure of it. And I looked it up on the and it's so close to me. I mean, it kind of, again, gives you validity for what you're experiencing. So this is Raven Rock. This is in Pennsylvania. Why can I not? Oh, is it Raven Rock Mountain?
Raven Rock Mountain Complex. It's in Fairfield, south of Gettysburg, probably southwest of Gettysburg. While you're looking that up, I will say that there is somebody else out there that has had a similar experience to what you have experienced. And it's an interesting thing because they caught it on video.
Really?
Yeah, there is a woman named Barbara Shoup, and she, back in, I believe it was 2014, was out doing her Bigfooting, you know, the researching stuff with her dog. I think their channel's called like Barb and Gabby or something like that.
I think I've heard of Barb and Gabby.
Yeah, I think Gabby has since passed away as a dog, but
so it's actually a real, legitimate video?
Oh yeah, I'll send it to you. This video is one of the biggest things that shaped my mind around the idea that Bigfoot or these, whatever they are, could be more than just a physical creature.
Right.
And so there's another woman named Claudia Ackley who she actually was in the news, I think it was last year in California. She was trying to sue the state of California for her experience with Bigfoot and them trying to keep it secret and stuff. She was there when they filmed this what we call a Cloaking Bigfoot, and she saw it with her own eyes. She's the only one who saw it with her own eyes. but what she saw with her own eyes was a hairy black creature. But on video, they filmed it on video by accident. They didn't realize they were filming anything because you couldn't see it on video. On video, you see a cloaked looking see-through, but you can see the outline of a creature moving, dropping down out of a tree. And so it wasn't until they got back to base camp and they were comparing notes, and they actually, on the way back to base camp, they were talking about it. And because nobody saw it except for Claudia. And she's like, I saw this thing. It was black. It was hairy. And so they get back to base camp and they look at the footage, and where she saw this Bigfoot type creature on video, it was cloaked, and you could see the outline of it and you could see it dropping out of a tree, but you couldn't see what she saw with her naked eye, which tells you they know how to, they have this supernatural ability to manipulate technology, which explains a lot when it comes to people's experiences trying to catch it on footage.
Okay. So you're not still recording, right?
Oh no, I'm still recording. This is still the interview.
Oh no.
No.
I have something that I want. Okay. Listen.
We can save it for after the interview if you don't feel comfortable.
Okay.
Let me ask you some questions.
It's 29 miles. It's
okay.
Raven
That's not
Rock
that far.
is 29 miles. Not that far. No.
Especially considering the fact that Raven Rock, where you're counting to 29 miles, is actually the entrance. And there's no telling how far it goes and
Tunnels,
where it goes underground.
Right, yeah.
And where the exits are.
If they can just come up out of tunnels, and we don't even know the technology. And here people are thinking that they are, their crayons aren't so sharp anymore. And they know that people are not that likely to believe a story like this, especially without tangible evidence. And one thing that I will say is, in daylight, my experiences are very minimal. I will not claim that I have these same type of, always have an overwhelming feeling of being watched on that property that never happened before. It's a very strong uncomfortability. We used to always hike, and I'd take my daughter down to the creek, and it's just changed. It's never been like that, for someone that's never experienced things like that before, and to come up with something that really isn't, by the book. It's, and again, this has now been going on for over 4 years, almost 5 years. So it's not something that was a passing, and every time I return, they are there immediately. I don't have to do any special kind of call or, any kind of announcing that I'm there. And it makes you wonder, like, are they whatever? I mean, our minds could go so wild with what is going on here. If it's not an interdimensional or spiritual being, like, am I a science experiment? I don't live there anymore, and if I was, wouldn't those things follow me back to where I live? I mean,
well, has your mom ever seen anything or experienced anything?
So this is the thing. People have asked me this before. My mom, I wouldn't say that she is a non-believer. She's a Christian. She teaches in a Christian school. But this has been too wild for her. She did see the blue eyes, like I said, but that was always my number one question. My mother is the one living here. How is she not being afflicted or experiencing these things? But one has to wonder, if you aren't really open, I guess, maybe to looking. She's lived there now, how long has she lived there? 30 years. So she is constantly telling me there's nothing there, there's nothing there. And when my daughter, her granddaughter, started seeing things, she just thought, oh, Bob, well, gosh, she's lived there forever. There's nothing there. And she won't sit still long enough to have the patience to, and it's not like these things are ruining anything on the property. I did forget to mention there was loud crashing, like at the back of the house several times, not like a slap or anything like that, but loud banging, like something had broken, something had fallen. And instead of thinking that was strange, she would just get mad and, she wants an explanation. And we never did find what it was. It almost it sounded like it was in the attic. I mean, something, I don't know how to explain it, but I would say that happened about 4 or 5 times. But she is one very much I think she's opening up more now as, my life has really changed. I'm in a great spot, and she doesn't, I think at the time she might have thought maybe I was depressed or anxious or paranoid or something like that. But now that the things have continued, I think she's opened up a lot more. Plus, I've had her listening to your podcast, which she loves, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, she
actually played the Hollow Earth one for her students in her class.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she teaches at a Christian school.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, that's really cool, and I'm glad that she enjoys the show. And listening to my show, maybe maybe I presented some information that made her think a little bit. I
think so. She has opened up because your shows offer a broader range of, and also she likes the biblical application because she is going to accept it more if it ties into what the Bible says. And I think that she's opening her eyes more because it makes sense. I mean, it does.
Yeah. And it's been a growing process for me throughout this show.
Yeah.
And like I told you in the beginning, I'm not sure if I said it in the interview or before we started recording, when you first contacted me, I was not in the mindset that I am today when it comes to these creatures and the possibilities. I didn't look through it. I didn't look at it through my biblical lenses, my theological convictions. And once I started doing it, it opened up a whole world of possibility that made these things actually more possible to exist than less likely. And it rocked me. And I'm glad that your mom is starting to, become more open to the idea of these things and all that stuff. I'll tell you what, Mandi, this is a fascinating story, and I'm actually kind of excited to talk to you once we record here to find out what else you wanted to say. So on that note, Mandi, thanks for being here. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Well, that's the show, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy, please share the show with your friends. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, email, water cooler. It could be the guy in the urinal next to you. Just lean over. Don't look. Just lean over and say, yo, bro, I ain't looking. Just telling you, you need to check out the Confessionals with Tony Merkel. That might be bad for your health, but if you do it, it might be a story worth telling on the Confessionals. Just saying, if I hear about this, I might have you on the show. Anyways, guys, take care. Stay